wherever you are in a company, know where that capital is coming from because that comes with its own pressures. And as soon as you understand that, then you know how to operate and again, communicate the value and set the right strategy and direct your team in the right way.
Welcome to the Peerbound podcast. I'm your host, Sunny Manivanan. Joining me today is Kate Mahon, who is the Director of Customer Lifecycle Marketing at Cisco. Kate's had a really impressive journey in customer marketing. She spent close to 7 years at Splunk, growing from customer PR lead all the way to Director of Global Customer Marketing, as Splunk itself grew at a rapid trajectory. Before going in-house, she actually got her start in agencies. So she has a bunch of agency experience as well, working at companies like Edelman across the Middle East and Asia Pacific, and then later running Penso's US practice as vice president. Today, she's at Cisco, leading customer lifecycle marketing after their acquisition of Splunk. Kate, it is such an honor to have you on the Peerbound podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Sunny. It's really, really exciting to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Amazing. Well, let's start at the beginning because you've had such a wonderful, varied career. Tell us a little bit about your first job at Edelman and what did you learn? Why did you take that job?
My first job before I even got to Edelman, my first job really was since I was a teenager, I knew I desperately wanted to live and work overseas. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, but I just wanted to see the world and learn. So when I graduated from college, I figured out I got a student working visa. And so if I applied for this within 2 months of graduating from college, I still qualified as a student, but it allowed me to work for a year in the UK. And so I graduated and packed my bags and moved to London and had some friends there, but it was really a friend of a friend who kind of vouched for me and said, we're hiring interns. This was at Hill and Knowlton, and I started an internship in London in Soho Square at Hill and Knowlton, and that was October of 2008 in London.
No.
And that kicked off, I'm that generation.
Got it. Okay.
Wow. I had a lot of friends who came out of college and went going back to graduate school.
Yep.
But I started right out in kind of the epicenter, if it wasn't in the States and it was in London, and
Totally.
A lot of learning.
So you graduate into the Great Recession.
Yes.
And by the way, you and I are in a similar boat. I graduated in 2007. So
okay.
roughly in the same boat. And
right.
This is now, what company are you working at out of your
So I was at Hill and Knowlton. And so really I kind of look at that as, in that year, started in that internship, and the account I was on was the Procter & Gamble account. And so was working on the very slick, high-tech laundry detergent and detergent category. So it was working across laundry detergent, washing detergent, but it was just a great experience and starting out in PR. And there were a couple things I learned just in that year at, working in London and starting out in PR. And it was really 3 things, which is I learned a ton about sales because in PR, you're selling a story and you are calling and you're pitching media and journalists and you're trying to get a story through about your client. So I learned about sales. I learned about the importance of a network. So, what had happened was I'm at Hill and Knowlton on an internship. Again, as we said, it's the Great Recession. Understandably, They put a hiring freeze. So they weren't, interns. My kind of stint ended after, that few months period. But a person I was working with had suggested me and recommended me to another agency, which had just won a really big account. and it was Microsoft. And so I ended up going to this other agency, and that was really the start into tech, working on Microsoft. So that lesson was really about having your network and knowing your network and starting that out early on. And then the third lesson as well in that year was really customer service and client servicing, because you have clients that you're working for, and kind of all of those together. When I look back then and where I am today, those are three big lessons that were really important to learn that still hold
It's
true
amazing.
today.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. As I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm smiling because I feel that you learned, at least in my view, the three most important lessons to build a great career, which are number
Yeah.
one, it's always about the customers.
Right.
Number two, don't forget about your network, because your
Yeah.
network will get you your next job and the next job
Yep.
and the next job. And
Yep.
number three is just stay entrepreneurial, stay scrappy,
That's it.
and don't take anything for granted. And I feel like we're now in 2026.
Right.
AI is here. And I'm like,
A
if
is
I
here.
had to give career advice to somebody coming out of college, I would say
Yeah.
exactly these three things, Kate.
Yes.
Exactly what you said.
Exactly. And, going back to the sales thing, like literally finding myself trying to, one of my clients was a national grocery store chain, and it was literally selling ham. It was like calling journalists. And I'm not kidding. Like, that's not a euphemism. It was, turkey schmirky, have you considered ham for your Christmas meal? Like
No
that,
way.
like, yeah. So, I think there's probably another lesson in there. I have other sort of battle scars around calling an editor at a very prominent financial newspaper and being 22 years old and really green and like not. The lesson I learned was know your audience and know your pitch and know who you're
Yeah.
talking to, because boy, did I learn a lesson that day when I had a certain editor saying, you PR people are no. And he rightfully so was totally right to say it. But, it's knowing your audience was another lesson. And
That's
I
great.
hope I never really have to sell ham again.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
I mean, it's tough to beat turkey schmirky. Have you
Yeah.
considered ham? Who's not gonna pick up the ham after that line of copy? But yeah, that's a good one. I feel like some of these early career lessons, when we look back on it a few years out, it just gets funnier and funnier every passing year. But it's also, there's just so much wisdom that you didn't realize at the time. What's one piece of career advice that you received? This can be early career, this can be later
Mhm.
career, that has stuck with you, and tell us the story of that.
Yeah. So this is also, again, starting out early in my career, but it still very much holds true. And my senior year of college, last term before graduating, and I was talking to, professor, and, he's kind of coaching, talking about, this is great. You're going out. And again, we didn't know there was a financial crisis about to happen, but this is really exciting. You're going out into the world. And he said, if there's something I learned myself and can impart, is you're always going to have a bad day at work. There's always, the grass isn't greener. You're always going to have a bad day at work, but figure out and pay attention to, where do you want to be on a bad day? In his case, he had been an attorney and, had a very successful career, but wanted to get back to teaching. And for him, it was realizing, on a bad day, I don't want to be in a courtroom anymore. I want to be in a classroom. And so that's something I've, it's one of those kind of check-in questions every few years to ask again, is, where do I like to be and what am I doing? And even on the toughest days where you're
Totally.
asking yourself, why am I doing this? And, it's, work isn't all of life. So I think being able to know that and just have that as a check-in question has been really, again, helpful throughout my career.
Love that advice.
Yeah.
And we could all use that again in 2026.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you a little bit about, as you moved from agency to agency and you're picking up these new accounts, these new skills, did you know where you wanted to take your career? You also had some international stints, which I believe, was very important to you. How did you make that stuff happen? Like, just walk me through sort of the second chapter of your career, so to speak.
Yeah, so the international piece, and if I look at that first part, what was great about working in agencies and consulting is you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different industries, a lot of different functions, and every sort of move internationally, again, it goes back to network and being, again, sort of that entrepreneurial and curiosity of raising a hand and saying, I want to learn about this market or this industry. And so each move, whether it was from London or from the Bay Area to the UAE to Hong Kong, it was knowing, obviously, having the network and knowing people and having worked with them. And then again, I think it's just being curious. And then I came, after almost 9 years overseas, I came back home to the Bay Area and had a friend who had also done some time overseas. We both came back at the same time, and she had started at this company called Splunk. And I noticed the way that she was talking about the company and talking about work. I hadn't kind of seen that in her before. So a position had opened up, and I was just really interested to kind of learn more and then also go in-house. So that
Yeah.
first part of the career is agency, and again, you're building a lot of the strategies but not necessarily always seeing it through. And I really wanted to now go in-house, work at a company, set those strategies and actually see it through and in place.
That is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you one question because you've worked in so many countries. Has that helped you in your career? How has that helped you in your view?
Oh yeah, I can absolutely say the biggest lesson I always kind of go back to when I was in the UAE. HP was my client, and a lot of that job was localizing campaigns across 10 markets in the Middle East, Mediterranean, and Africa. And I still reported back to corporate, the team back in the States, but there was a real education there in one, America is not the center of the world. Once you're working overseas, you get that, I think sometimes that
Totally.
sense of, well, this is how we do it here, so that's how it should work there. That's not how it works. Weekends are different, media is different. There's a lot, the takeaway and the lesson is really seeking to understand. And I feel like that's so important, again, as you move up into leadership as well, is rather than dictating sort of your own point of view, I think sometimes just stopping and asking a question of, the team and understanding why things are done the way they're done. I think there's a lot you can kind of get to more quickly when you're trying to understand rather than trying to impose your own doctrine.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Well, let me ask you now about Splunk.
Yeah.
You start as a PR lead, customer PR lead, and you're still at Splunk technically because Cisco owns Splunk, and you're now director of customer lifecycle marketing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few stops and promotions on the way to where you are today. What's made you successful in this role, and what, in your view, helped you get promoted? And what advice would you have for people who are in that role and they're like, I think I'm ready for the next role, but maybe not quite, and how do I get there? What's your advice?
So you actually had my former manager on your podcast, Jess Walker McFarland.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And she's just the best. So
She's phenomenal.
she had taken on, it was customer advocacy and showcases at the time, and we were really going through a big kind of refresh. We were going through a brand refresh, obviously trying to move and talk to another audience, which is VP plus. And so the programs we designed around that in terms of executive engagement programs, but also the stories we told, which were kind of leading to more brand campaigns and then also going technical. So Jess was leading that up, and the takeaway is really, if there's a leader that you really want to learn from and can support you, that was huge. So Jess was that person for me. She's really smart. She's someone who is exceptionally skilled at getting a seat at the table. And again, communicating, managing up, managing across. And she was someone I learned a ton from. And again, I just love that we're both in this space in this industry today. So in my own experience, it was having that person. And then equally, how do you communicate the value of what you do to the business? And so I think within customer marketing, my view is when you're marketing to customers with customers, you're really impacting the entirety of the life cycle. And so when you can understand that when you have a customer that you're getting media coverage and business press for PR, so you're hitting awareness, and then you have customers talking to analysts, and you have your maybe product review program that's helping in that consideration phase. If you're having customers talk to a prospect, that's kind of accelerating a deal. And then if you have really great personalized content and campaigns that support adoption and expansion, all of that have metrics attached to it because that's all of marketing. Again, how are you supporting brand awareness, consideration, analyst recognition? How are you supporting, again, pipeline influence? And when you can stitch that together and tell that story, that's very powerful for a CMO and for the rest of the business. And so I think being able to understand that impact and tell that story and show the value is really important.
That's amazing. Really cool. And I didn't know that you and Jess had worked together before.
Yeah.
She's incredible, and
Yeah.
really cool to hear that connection.
Yeah. Shout out Jess.
Yeah. Shout out to Jess Walker McFarland. Awesome. Well, good stuff. Well, listen, let me ask you a little bit about what advice would you have given yourself 5 years ago, knowing, yeah, what piece of career advice would you give yourself 5 years ago? I suppose knowing what you know now.
So this was another thing I actually heard. This is a couple of years ago. I went back to school, and this kind of goes back to that question of during my time at, I think, Splunk as well, and having really supportive leaders is I went back to school to do my MBA. And so this goes to the question of career advice. I learned this I had a professor for private equity and venture capital class, and this really opened my mind, which was understand where the capital is coming from, whatever company you're at. So wherever you are in a company, know where that capital is coming from, because that comes with its own pressures.
Right.
And as soon as you understand that, then you know how to operate and again, communicate the value and set the right strategy and direct your team in the right way. So what does that mean? If you're at a public company, then you're measured quarterly and you're also beholden to returning shareholder value, but you're feeling pressures quarterly, and maybe budgets or things that you've set in Q1 are going to be different in Q3. If you're working in a private equity backed company, there might be a little bit more of, you may not have that quarterly and shock from the street, but you're working on a compressed timeline and you really want to be showing, again, operating efficiencies and where you're, again, using your resources really wisely. If you're venture backed, know what funding cycle you're in. Are you at the start of a raise, in which case that's great and you've got growth, or are you coming to the end and you're not sure if your funding's going to be coming up? And again, family owned, that's also different. And you may not have, again, going back to that, you may not have that quarterly pressure, but it's also about knowing what's important to a family owned business. So when you really understand that, I think that helps how you operate within a business. So that's always, I think, something to keep in mind as moving throughout a career.
That is really cool. Really cool. And I think, again, relevant to where we are in this cycle of the market,
Yes.
where
Yes.
no matter whether you're a public company, you're a private equity company, you're
Right.
a venture-backed company, or you're family-owned or profitable company, there's everybody's asking questions about
Yeah.
what kind of business are they in, and is Claude going
Right.
to take over everything?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
think that's it.
yeah, and look, let me ask you. I can't believe we've gone now almost 30 minutes without talking about AI, but here it is. Once
Check your
you
bingo card.
yeah, exactly. Well, we got this is like at the middle, it's at the center of the bingo card. And every conversation gets, you at least get to tackle this one. What's your view on AI in marketing and AI in the tech industry in general? Everybody feels, I think, forced to just whitewash everything with AI, but do you use it personally? Do you use it professionally? Like, what does that look like for you? And where are you seeing results that you're honestly impressed by?
So, how I think about AI and the tool, you know, how it's impacting the industry, I will say I happen to know an economist, and we had an email exchange last week because I I said, "Help me. You've kind of lived through and you've seen a lot of cycles in the Bay Area, but you also understand the kind of the macro view as well. How might one want to think about this?" And what I love is that even an economist can say, "I don't know." Like, I think anyone who knows where it's going, sometimes I question. So I'm not even going to go down that path.
Right.
But I don't think it's either. It was a good question. It's kind of finding the balance and finding the middle. I think that's really what it is. I look at it as a tool. It's something that can, what are the, for our team, we look at what are the processes that we're doing today that are, again, pretty rote or repetitive, and where are things that we can easily, it can be anything from a call recording with a customer to then get the right type of content in that to kind of more quickly build out content for our sales team or marketing content. So there's ways in which we're using tools there. I think there's also the stitching it together in terms of workflows. But I think the other thing is if you show an excitement and a curiosity, and I think this is just kind of everything I think about in my career is
Yeah,
you show up with a curiosity, openness, a willingness to learn, probably not over investing too much in one thing, then there's maybe something to build there. I have no idea if that was coherent, but I think it's,
honestly,
I don't know.
it's
Who else knows?
I don't know. It's probably the most honest take on AI in today's landscape, because I think you've probably heard about the Gartner hype cycle, where you go through the peak of expectations and then the trough of disillusionment. And I think we're somewhere in that zone, depending on where you are and how much you've used it at this point.
So actually, I'll go back and say this. If you are able to communicate the business outcome, what are you trying to do to impact something within the business? And AI has helped with that. Great. But starting it with what's the problem you're trying to solve and how might you be able to do that more efficiently? I think it's being able to start there. I kind of think sometimes the challenge is maybe we don't know yet exactly, or we're not starting out with the right question and framing it and being able to communicate what's the business challenge and the outcome that we're trying to solve for, not using it for the sake of using it.
Totally. And I think there's a lot of experimentation going on, and I think
Yeah.
there's so much peer pressure now to say that you are an AI expert, or that you're giving it its best shot and you're
Yeah.
using it and you're so efficient and so
Yeah.
on. And I think what you said and going back to basics is actually where the next chapter is.
Yeah.
And we have to do that.
That that's it. because I think that also kind of goes back to as well, again, knowing where the capital's coming from, knowing what type of company you're in, what are the pressures you're going to be having. So you need to know how to communicate, again, the value of what you're doing.
Yep. It's very true. Very true. Cool. Well, Kate, we get to this section of the podcast, which is really the peer-bound talk, which is your peer influences, your
Yeah.
inspiration. So I'd love to know, first of all, one book or movie that you would recommend to everyone and why.
Okay. I am reading right now the book Designing Your Life. I'm really enjoying it. It goes back to, I think that, what my college professor had said is know where you want to be on a bad day. And this book has just been a great reminder and kind of a stopping point again to check in and look at I'm a whole person. I don't just have a professional life. I have my health and relationships, family, a lot of things. And so, how am I in that area? And it applies a lot of design thinking concepts of what do I want the next bit to look like. And it also, I love the concept of prototyping and iterating. And that's sort of, again, what this book kind of helps guide through is where am I interested in certain areas and how can I, rather than take a big leap and change a job, where might there be groups I'm interested in learning from or service work I want to do? Or again, how do I kind of want to round out a life? And I think it's relevant at a lot of different stages of life. So
Love that.
check it out.
Okay, cool. Designing your life. Let's go pick it up. And yeah, it seems like a good exercise to go through.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Who are your favorite SaaS marketers and why?
So obviously my team. I do,
Shout out to Splunk and shout out to
shout
Cisco.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, again, it's feel really fortunate to work with them. But this is customer marketing where we talk about marketing, but also customer marketing. And I really do think, I was at a dinner last night with a number of customer marketers. And I tell you, this is a group of people that you're asked to do a lot with a little sometimes. And it's probably a group that knows how to be really scrappy, really creative, and again, sort of forced to work with and understand the life cycle of a customer and impact every part of it. So a lot of love and support to all the customers in SaaS right now. Because again, you're asked to do a lot with a little.
I love it. And then last question is, I want to ask about your favorite technology or app or software solution. It can be for personal, business, whatever it is. What's your favorite technology that you use?
So my phone has this really cool, and I'm stealing this from somebody else, but it's great, has this really cool app that has a phone on it. And I can pick it up. Anyone in my life, I can hear their voice and talk to them.
You can have a conversation. You can talk to them.
And I can have a conversation. And it doesn't just write. You can actually do voice. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of digital fatigue that, again, where I am right now, I'm really trying to be thoughtful about connecting with people and having conversation. If you can't be in person, then just having someone's voice and talking and catching up rather than doing it through, something else. That's important for me right now.
I love that. First of all, you totally got me. And it was extremely well executed. And man, I had a 2-hour chat with one of my very good friends from college while I was walking around Central Park this weekend, and I had the time to actually go make that happen. And it was just so relaxing. It was great.
Yeah.
And we walked through like 20 years of history together, and it was awesome.
Amazing.
And so I'm a huge proponent of the phone. Everybody should pick up the phone, call your friends. Perhaps call Kate. You're gonna call Jess. You're gonna call just McFarland.
But this is the example. I was driving into our office a couple weeks ago, and I just went, I'm gonna call Jess, and she answered and was like, Kate, man, what is up? And it was just nice. And I tell you what, like, think about an app on your phone where, again, if you're calling somebody you care about, have a relationship with, haven't talked to in a long time, that's probably the one app on your phone where you're walking away feeling good.
Yeah, man, Kate, that is powerful, and I cannot think of a better way to conclude this episode. I mean,
Perfect.
this episode is just so full of gems, and
Oh.
I cannot thank you enough. I think there's
Mhm.
a lot of earned wisdom that you've shared with us, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you for joining us, and wonderful to talk to you as always.
Yeah, thanks, Sunny. This has been great. And you're building something really great, and you're just a tremendous leader. So, thank you for doing this and for getting people together.
No, it's very kind of you, and thank you, Kate. And very excited to get this episode out there soon.
Sounds great.